Welcome to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. I'm your host for this session. I'm Sean.
And I'm Kevin.
And together we're going to talk about a unique problem that you might be having in your sales process and your sales world. This 15 minutes is designed for salespeople, sales managers, and CEOs of the company that are trying to increase their revenue and trying to be more productive in your sales processes. So let's get started.
You know, Kevin, I love Waze because when I'm using Waze and I'm trying to go through an area of town or the state where I'm not familiar and I'm counting on it to tell me what to do, it's got that checkered flag right at the end of my route. We had Jim Hardwick on a few weeks ago, and he talked to he's born and raised in Speedway, Indiana. Great interview. We had a great conversation with Jim. I'm sure you remember that. And if those people out there listening, if you didn't catch it, go back a couple of weeks, pick that one up. It was a great conversation about being a servant leader. But anyway, I digress a little bit on that. The thing I love about having a map to get me where I'm going to go, especially in the modern day where I can use my phone or my car to help me out, is it tells me all of the steps that I need to go in the strategy of getting me from where I'm at to where I'm going to be. And I think that a lot of salespeople don't understand that a strategy is more than just the turns along the way, but it's also how am I going to get through that area? What's the speed limit going to be? All those warnings that I'm going to pick up along the way. And they just don't understand all of the challenges they're going to go through. And they kind of take them as they come, as opposed to figuring out everything you need to know to get to your location in the amount of time that you have allocated to get to your location.
You know, I love that analogy, Sean. And you got me thinking, we haven't talked about this. I'm going to interject something here. Do you remember when we only had paper maps? We only had what the Department of Transportation or the Bureau of Transport, whatever. I'm from North Carolina, so the DOT is what we called it in North Carolina. We had these paper maps and we would chart our path to our goal. But now with the advent of things like Waze and technology, we have all these external factors like traffic, time of day, construction, toll roads that helps us better route our data. Here we are at mid-year, and we're thinking about the rest of the year's sales strategy. We may have started the year with a paper map, but I think your analogy holds really well with Waze and helping bring in additional factors and letting technology and tools and modern organizational tools influence the second half of the year for your goal reaching. Great analogy, and thanks for letting me partner on to that a little early. But for strategy for the second half of the year, and I'm going to see how many S sounds I can put together, second half of the year sales strategy, I get to thinking about all of the things that could happen versus should happen. Let's talk about sales strategy and what should happen for the second half of anyone's sales year.
You can't have a sales strategy if you don't have a sales process. I do believe that you need to have that sales process because that is your, let's just call it your paper map. It is this is how it's supposed to go if we have no other information. This is how the sales is supposed to go. So we should start with that paper map. But now we have some construction up ahead. We have a little bit of a detour. Maybe there was an accident along the way, and we had to adapt. And that's the great thing about Waze, of course, is it helps us adapt to new things that happen that it picks up from the car in front of you, 20 cars in front of you. As we're going through that process, and now we're at the half-year point, you've been working on this deal that you want to close, and you've been working on these deals, if you're a sales leader, that you want to have closed. You now have a little bit more information. What is there construction on the road? Is there a pothole that we have to deal with? Is there other things happening? Now that you're at the half-year point, take a look at your sales pipeline as it's mapped out in your sales funnel and your processes and figure out where are we going through some obstacles that we just didn't interpret very well, or where can we actually go faster and work faster to get things done, because now we're in a fast spot, right? We're going 65 miles an hour. Most of the people that listen to this probably don't go 65 miles an hour in a 65. They go 70 or 75 or 80 or 100. But anyway, the goal here is to go as fast as possible when you can so that you can go appropriate amount of time when you're in the danger zone, when you're in trouble. Now's the time at the mid-year point when we really have to focus in on what things are going wrong and where do we have to put a little bit more effort, and then what things are going right so we can go fast. And really focus on that and have our strategy be ready to update and not just deal with the individual tactics of, do I put a little more gas in? Do I slow it down? Do I hit the brakes? That's too tactical. We need to be thinking about how are we going to get through that pothole? How are we going to get through that detour that's still 5-10 miles ahead of us? And thinking ahead a little bit, should we take a different type of a detour? Should we get a different car in place? Whatever the case may be, we need to be thinking ahead a little bit. And now that we have more information, we're halfway through the year. Now's the time when sales leaders are working with their salespeople to figure out what do we have to do to make sure we get there on time. On time meaning before the end of the year, but definitely it can also mean before the end of the quarter, before the end of the week, if you really need that deal closed that fast.
For all things car related and road related, somebody's going to think that we're highway transportation engineers because those were some good analogies. We should give ourselves a pat on the back for that one. That felt good to talk about travel because we have been on the road for the better part of our sales careers. But let's make this a little more down to the pavement. Another reference, but let's really get this where a sales leader or salesperson can really get a handhold on strategy. So you use the term strategy and tactics, and those are two that I often find in my practice where I have to kind of talk about those and what's the difference between a sales strategy and a sales tactic. For example, I say, well, sales strategy really starts with a person, almost like a commander's intent. For anyone out there in the military, you heard the term commander's intent. And for the boilerplate version of that, it's like take the hill. And the commander is giving that to all of his lieutenants and the infantry, and take the hill. I want to capture that hill. For a sales leader, it's, hey, we want to enter this new geography. We want to capture this new tier of client. Is it a acquisition strategy? Is it a divestiture strategy? Is it a develop a competitive offering strategy? That way, we as sales leaders can say, hey, we're outside of the market in price. We need a strategy to become more price centric. We're outside of the value proposition, or we're not adding enough value. We need to become value centric for the rest of this quarter, year, month, week, whatever the timeline is. I venture to say that no strategy is a week-long strategy. Our strategies should be much longer range. For anyone out there thinking, okay, well, what should my strategy be for this week? I would push back and say, you probably need a tactic for this week, or a goal, or a to-do list for this week. Strategy should be much longer in frame. When I'm talking to customers about developing a strategy, let's imagine we're to your mid-year point where we haven't quite made our goal. Our strategy for the second half of the year might be twofold. It might be, hey, I need new relationships that will mature later this year. So I've got an acquisition relationship strategy. And then I also need a capitalization strategy for existing business. I need to sell through my customer base. That becomes a value-based sell-through strategy. And then if I'm putting a dotted line on that, if you all are thinking in Excel or thinking in Word and outline format, that comes from, okay, the next bullet line down is, what do I do today? What do I do tomorrow? What is the tactic? Do I need to meet this group of people and then learn who they report to or their buying patterns or behaviors, and lean into the, what do I do next? Kind of like your sales process. Your sales process is your sales strategy. Maybe even you could, in certain circles, you could say that's also part of my sales methodology. A little bit of difference and nuance there, but definitely worth talking about. But as we think through this, we got to part and parcel out, what is the strategy? What is the tactic? What am I going to do repetitively and now and later?
As I was thinking that, I was also thinking that salespeople can learn from this as well. Sales leaders, of course, are doing some of those things that you just talked about. Salespeople, the people that have an individual deal or set of deals that they're going after, they need to think ahead as well and kind of map out that process. Maybe you have an account where that customer, that prospect, because of some early conversations you've had with that prospect, you are pretty confident they need to have 2 or 3 reference calls that they're going to have before they're ready to buy. Still have some more work to do maybe before you get there, but you're going to have 2 or 3 reference calls. Tactically, you could wait until the last minute and then call up your favorite 2 or 3 people to see if they would be a reference call. But strategically, let's think ahead a little bit and let's plan. You're going to need those phone calls. Let's plan for that in advance. It's even easier when the customer says, okay, now I need to talk to your 2 or 3 customers. We've talked about this, that I wanted to do that when we get to this stage of the process, this stage of the buying process, that we're just ready. You just have those ready to go. You don't have to wait for, okay, well, let me go ask permission, which then takes another 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 weeks in order to get all that done. Let's do that now. Your individual tactics that are going to happen, like asking that other customer, that really good customer, to be a reference for you, you can get that done early because you understand the strategy that you have with that prospect, that they're going to need some extra help. Same thing can be done with, they're going to have to check out your finances. Maybe you can get that done early. Those little things as a salesperson, what is your strategy that you've talked over with your prospect that that you're going to have to go through? What steps can you get done early because you understand the strategy of everything you're going to do with that prospect to get them to trust that your product and your company is the right deal to do? What can you do in advance to make that happen? It's just a little bit easier. You're not in panic mode when it happens, and you're working towards success.
Working towards success. If I'm a sales leader and I'm coaching to help a salesperson understand what is their strategy, what is their tactic, and what is their to-do list, oftentimes somebody who's not accustomed to doing this, if they're early in their development, they may say something like, hey, I really need to get a meeting with, I'm going to say Scott. I got to get a meeting with Scott. As a leader, I can say, what does that help you do? I'm going to back him up from to-do item to tactic to strategy. If they say, hey, I really want to sell 20% more this next year, I want to grow my business, I want to be in growth mode. Okay, well, what do you think you need to do week in, week out to drive growth? Well, who is responsible for helping you get there? Who are the strategic relationships you could leverage to help you grow that will help you sell through? The leadership skill is helping people see the progression, the line item where you type in your line item strategy, hit the enter key, hit tab, and you're over, and then you're in tactic, hit enter, hit tab, and you're over. It's just cascading like a stair step kind of behaviors. But depending on where your salesperson comes into that progression is where you meet them and help them think up and down from their idea. We never want to shut anything down. We always want to build them up, catch people doing stuff right.
I agree 100%. It's interesting, as you were saying that, I was also thinking about, this is halfway in the year, and I'm kind of big on making sure you're ready for the end of the year. I've talked about that the last podcast. I talked about it in this podcast. But it's also the time when you need to be strategic about being ready for next year. What is your strategy for next year? Don't wait until December to write your plan. Don't wait till October to think about your plan. Instead, it's July. Take some time to think about, gee, next year, it'd be great if we hit 25% growth over this year. What do I need to do as a sales leader or as a salesperson to make that happen next year? What partners do I need to start engaging with more because it's going to be a longer term relationship and I need to build that a little bit more? What areas of the country do I have to spend more time in and have to get a better map for? What industries do I have to understand a little bit better? Start putting those plans together now so that you are ready to put them in place in November when you start doing your plan, and you are ready to start executing on that plan January 1st, and 6 months away.
So that's some heavy hitting stuff. It's thinking about now, thinking about the past, the future, and the further out on the timeline future. Really strategic thinking. It's the ways in traffic and the way we do our job, all meeting in the middle in sales management and leadership. Sean, this has been a fun topic. We got a jam because here it is 15 minutes, and we have made a promise to our listening audience that we'd have them out in 15 minutes. So as always, good to see you. Sell effectively and happy selling. And that's a wrap. Thanks again for joining Kevin and Sean on Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. Tune in every Tuesday or when our podcast drops every Tuesday at 4:30, wherever you consume your podcast. And don't miss our monthly CEO workshop, where we unpack some of the big CEO questions facing your business. Until next time, we're looking forward to seeing you. Happy selling.